This video contains gratuitous use of profanity and uncomfortable pauses to compensate for lack of professionalism and original thought. Viewer discretion advised.
Coming to you live from Buffalo Bill's basement lair, we bring you the Nerdy Manroom show with your host, Hassel and Monster. And Monster, this week we got a hell of a show. We got R-rated properties that were turned into children's properties that we should not have fucking had in the 80s and 90s. So, hey, we got a show.
You know, it's so interesting, too, because you look back at times like now, it's like all the ratings really bleed into each other so much. And it's like, kids go, you're supposed to be with somebody 17 or older, go to an R-rated movie or anything, but you still see kids going and seeing R-rated movies now. And you get it on streaming platforms, you get it immediately. There's no real censor on it, right? And when you get it on streaming platforms, you get the whole thing. They're not cutting stuff out. This is not like watching on TBS and TNT where they bleep every other word out. So it's very strange to look back at the 80s and see how many of those things were. And even into the late 70s and 80s as well. But, I mean, just see how many of those things actually got turned from, okay, this is for adults, and now all of a sudden we're going to make a kid's version of it and draw them into just so we can sell toys. You know, it had to start with the He-Man stuff where it's, hey, now you can actually market the toys towards kids. And that was more for TV shows, but I think it branched out into the movies at that point, too, a lot more. Like, you could get Star Wars toys in the 70s, but it's because it wasn't a TV show, so there's no FCC regulation on it. But then you get to like He-Man and they take all that away and say, nah, you can market the whole hour-long commercial for this 30-minute commercial for this toy brand.
What's crazy is
everything else lead into it.
I remember probably in around 88 or somewhere in there, you actually still seen, they were still cussing in some basic nudity on like TBS and USA Network. When they aired these movies, it was probably the 90s where I remember them getting just drastic with the changing of the words or bleeping words. I mean, I remember seeing like Scarface or Godfather or movies like this, and they wasn't editing nothing.
You watch some of them on there now, and it's like this 2-hour movie is like an hour and 15 minutes because they've got so
Hey, you mother jumper. It's like the worst ones ever. It's like, really? Who brainstormed this?
Yeah, and you can tell, and a lot of times the voices didn't match either, but it's very interesting to see. Oh, you'll have to excuse me. I'm fighting sinuses. It's that time of year. So I think we decided we were going to skip Geek Week this week and just go straight into that just because had a lot to share on. But I have been traveling a lot, so I have not had as much time to prepare. So I will let you kick us off, and I will follow suit.
Well, dude, I figure we got to lead out with, I ain't going to say the mother of all, but definitely one of the more violent properties to become a children's theme. And I'm going to go with RoboCop. You couldn't get much more a violent movie. With the I buy that for $1, the guy that, had all the hooter chicks in there. And it was F this, F that, brutality. I mean, it's a good gore fest. Even though part 2 was a little kiddied up a little bit, it still had its moments. You pumped the guy's chest full of bullets and shot him out of a window in part 1. But the next thing you know, it's an animated series. It's a toy line. And I'm not talking about just any toy line. It had glow-in-the-dark figures. Nothing screamed 90s or late 80s, early 90s children like glow-in-the-dark.
Or popping caps, because all of the RoboCop ones had, when you open the backpack and they had the popping caps inside there where you could pull the thing down and they would pop, make a gun sound.
And it was even video games. I mean, I know that's what's crazy when I was doing this right here. Like the majority of them, you had animated series, toy line, video game, or comic books or something. And I do remember getting the RoboCop magazine. I say magazine. It was like kind of like the Conan. Their comic was the big ass magazine type comic, but it was black and white because of the violence. But it was panel for panel the movie. Like even the nudity.
But even with that though, I see it more in the magazines and the comics because they were. Everybody thinks comics were made for kids, but honestly, other than DC, probably up until like the '80s, it really, that's the only property that was making for kids. Everybody else was starting to produce them more for the adult reader because that's who was reading them. But
No, absolutely.
But look back at, you brought up Conan. Conan had an animated series in the 90s, early 90s, 93, 94, something like that. Had an animated series.
He's one of my honorable mentions because I think he had a good run too as far as episodes. It was like when I got looking, I was like, he had that many episodes.
Yeah,
it's high up there actually.
Actually, I turned that cartoon on Tubi the other day. It's actually on Tubi now. You can actually stream it. But think back to some of the stuff in there, and even now, the Conan with Jason Momoa was probably much more adult than Arnold's was.
That was probably the most true to the character, honestly.
Yeah, but the Jason Momoa one, I mean, there was naked women every few scenes, or topless women at least. They showed him chopping off limbs and stuff. You didn't see it. You might have seen that in the Arnold movie, like, oh, I chop you, and then your limb falls, but you don't see it actually sever it. Wasn't the same.
Conan is very Game of Thrones minus the incest, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's just it's almost like in the Punisher universe, the Punisher Warzone movie. Well, I didn't care for that guy as much as Frank Castle. True to the character, it was the more true. And Momoa's Conan was 100% a lock.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, RoboCop, though, I can see being one of those where I didn't see how they ended up making that for kids, but they did. But do you remember, too, though, the final scene with the main bad guy? Doesn't he get his... Was he completely melted or just his face was melted with acid or whatever, which is a horrifying scene as a youngster?
That wasn't one of the final scenes. That was during the final battle.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's in the third act of the movie.
Yeah. He got just mushed and then he hit the car and just splats. It's like, oh.
But remember, think about that and then think back to another movie that came out just a year, maybe a couple years later. I can't remember exactly when, but with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was a kid's movie, and the villain in that actually melts into a pool of acid.
It's true.
I'm like, I didn't remember that until I was thinking about it. Until we were talking about this today. I was like, oh, I remember now in Roger Rabbit, the dude melts in acid because it's Christopher Lloyd, isn't it?
Yeah, the dip. You put him in the dip.
Yeah.
Which I will say that RoboCop does have one of the more iconic lines ever. When you hear Red Foreman go, "Bitches leave," just say, that's Red. That's somebody's father. That's Foreman's dad.
Yeah, but he also told everybody all the time he was going to put his foot in their ass. So
he did. Poor Clarence Boddicker really reformed. I'll give him that.
Oh man. So what's some of the other ones you had? Because again, I didn't get a chance to put together a list, so we're going to run down yours, and I'll see if I can remember. It's funny too that a lot of these, even if they didn't get toys or cartoons, almost every one of the R-rated properties got a video game. And who was playing the video games back then? Adults, it's not like now where most of the adults are playing Call of Duty and stuff. It was back then. It was like, oh, that's a kids thing. We don't do that.
In the 80s and even into the very early 90s, I would say it was very frowned upon for a non-teen and under to be playing video games.
Oh yes, yeah.
So next on my list, Wes Craven's Swamp Thing.
While not quite an R-rated movie, it had a lot of elements that way.
Well, I think the first one was, but the second one wasn't. The second one was PG-13. It was kind of campy.
I thought the first one was too. I'm not sure. I'm going to look at it while you're talking, though. So.
Okay. Well, we got an animated series, 40 episodes. 40 episodes. I mean, the first series was only 5, and I think it got canned, and then it came back as Alpha Commandos for 40 episodes. But I remember the toy line being very prevalent at the time. It was pretty cool toys, actually. And there was an NES game. It was a stinker. I went back and played it not long ago because I have the Raspberry system that has, all the ships on it. It is a stinker. It's bad.
It is actually rated PG.
Is it?
Yeah.
The first one?
Yeah. From 1982, yep.
Well, I apologize, people.
No, I was assuming the same too at first, because I think Big Rob was the one who told me the other day when we were texting about it, and he was like, "It's like I don't think it was rated R, but it had a lot of elements in it." And I was like, "Really?"
I remember part 2 being PG because our third PG-13. It made it a lot campier and whatever. So
I don't know if
I
I ever
guess
watched part 2 other than the TV edit cut on TNT or
part
whatever.
part 2 is
USA for
actually
that one.
pretty good. To me, I enjoy it more of the bunch, even though it's kind of campy and corny. The effects are better, and it's just I don't know. I dig it. It's got all the cheese factor of the '80s that you just love. So I will be
Go
full
ahead.
blown rated R with this next one.
Before you get to that one, it's very interesting too with the Swamp Thing to have the toys, because those were they didn't fit the full scale because they weren't doing them. They were doing those in 5 and 6 inch, and your DC stuff was still at that time 3 3/4. But it would have been a huge boon to fit him into that, because if you look at DC Comics now, he's like all over the place in there. Every time they have a big crossover, he's a big part of it now. It's like he would have been great back then to have him to be able to fit in scale with them, but. I had a lot of the toys. I had the one where
he was greatly underappreciated, other than Alan Moore's run on him in the '80s, I'd say.
Yeah. So, what was your next one you were fixing to get into? Because I know I interrupted you.
Well, I will go. I know this one's R-rated enough that it might have been close to NC-17. Honestly, The Toxic Avenger.
Yeah, that one.
Trauma, or however you say it. But he actually squeezed 13 episodes of a series,
which is also on Tubi.
And I will say his toy line was actually fairly cool because it fit in very well with the Ninja Turtles. They were all the same scale, build.
Yeah.
I don't remember if Playmates actually made them or not, but it was very online with the Ninja Turtles.
That's a good question. I don't know who made them either. That's one I'll have to look up while we're talking too. But I remember that was one of those movies that I never watched all the way through because honestly, some of the body horror from the very beginning of it was kind of like, no, I can't watch this. It was not so much scary as one of those. It was just like made me queasy. I was like, oh no. Mm.
It was the movie itself is just terrible. The only thing that's well, as a young guy, I remember watching it just because there was nudity in it. Honestly, because it was just that bad. And then it was like, okay, it's bad, but it's watchable, And then you're like, it's a cool premise. And like I said, I don't remember much about the actual animated series, honestly. I remember the villain looking cool, the little Darth Vader mask he had. And there were some elements here or there. And ironically, while we're on it, he is actually getting a remake with Peter Dinklage as Toxie.
I have seen that's coming out, and it's just for clarification, it was Playmates Toys that actually did do them.
Oh, okay.
I remember having him specifically, and I played with him with the Ninja Turtles, to be honest, but I don't remember having any others from the set, but I remember him.
I had him, and I had a couple of the villains, and I think there was a deal where I traded somebody something for them. My own school bus had them, and it was like, I'll give you this, and I lowballed them, and they fit in with my turtle line, and the mop was a pretty cool accessory. I don't know why I liked it. It is what it is.
That is an interesting one. Again, I don't think I've ever made it all the way through the entire movie, but to see that for kids is like after you think back about the body horror, and that's like, really? Now we're marketing this to kids, and I think it only got that treatment because of the Ninja Turtles, because it didn't come out as a toy and the cartoon until '91. So
I want to say USA Network was my first exposure to the actual movie, if I'm not mistaken. It was on one of those up all nights with Rhonda Shear. And that's why I say I remember there being some things on network television that wouldn't fly today.
Yeah.
So moving into the number 4 bracket, Rambo, the animated series. John Rambo, the killest motherfucker of all time. He not only got an animated series, but a toy line. The works.
Yeah.
I mean, the works. He got 65 episodes. Did you realize that?
I didn't realize it was that long. I think I was thinking more about Chuck Norris's Karate Commandos was only like half of the season. It was like 10, 15 episodes, something. And that was it. Which for some reason, was another one surprising, but
yeah.
But
I thought that Chuck had got a longer run than Rambo did, but I was wrong. When I went back and was looking through this stuff the other day, and I was like, holy shit, really?
Yeah, I think Rambo had I always got confused as to which one was the longer series, but I think Rambo was the longer one, and then Chuck was only 10 episodes or something.
'Cause I remember when it came out, I had Rambo, and I got Rambo, and then there was like some Russian villain or something or whatever. But I remember He-Man was still very big at the time because I had the what was it? It was one of the Horde, like a, I don't want to call it a vehicle, but it was one of the toys. It was like a spider thing that you wound up, and the top spun around. It had two claws, and it had the spider legs, so it kind of wobbled. So like I'm sitting there playing.
The name of it.
I'm playing with Rambo, and of course it comes with grenades. Because I mean, what children's toy doesn't come with grenades in the '80s? And he climbs up on there and he throws a grenade in because in the little armpit things there was a hole there. Thought it was cool at the time until I couldn't ever get the grenade out after that. My toy rattled for the rest of his days.
And I'm pretty sure he had two toy lines too. Is the cartoon I think was called Champion of Liberty or something, and then there was Rambo's Freedom Force or Force of Freedom or something was another one, which was
those are the ones I had.
I think they were still the same toys, but I think they marketed them with a different name and used actual like an image of him from the movie on the card because the Champion of Liberty ones had the animated version of him on the card.
I do know the one I had was not the animated because they were bigger in scale. I want to say Remco made those, but I'm not. Could be wrong, but
I think it was. I think they were called like Freedom Force or Force of Freedom or something, and then the cartoon was Champions of Liberty.
So moving into the next one is something that should have never, ever been geared towards children. Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, that was the most violent game of all time.
That's the thing, though. Even though it shouldn't have been, it started out as marketed towards kids because it was a video game. And back then, who was playing the video games? It was not the adults, really.
But they got an animated series and a toy line by Hasbro in the G.I. Joe scale. So you know who's buying that and what you're going to do with those. So you got Goro ripping fucking Duke's arms off now. And yeah.
Yeah. And I know they were packed. They were the same scale. They were packaged in G.I. Joe packs, too, as a crossover, weren't they? Because Street Fighter was as well.
I want to say they were almost like marketed like they were part of the Ninja Force. So around the same time Ninja Force got pretty popular, all that was at one time.
I know Street Fighter was marketed that way, and Street Fighter had the figures in there too. Because I remember it was kind of cool to be able to play with Blanca versus Goro type thing, because you weren't going to get that in a game at the time.
No, we still haven't got that, but yet we had it in toy form. Thank you, Hasbro.
Well, think about later on when they cross over with DC. Now you got the Joker in there with Goro and stuff, right?
I will say that is actually pretty cool. It was a pretty cool concept when those come out. Well, Mortal Kombat versus DC games. I enjoyed both of them. They were fun, and I mean, it was especially like when I got Scorpion and still got to kick the shit out of people. So
how bad was that cartoon Defenders of the Realm though? When you look at that and then you watch the movies or you play the video games, you're like, it has the same concept somewhat overall, but the whole portrayal of it's like, it doesn't mix. It's like, okay, you took everything out that made it cool and turned it into something else entirely.
I mean, we can be honest here. None of these animated series were good. They were all terrible, really terrible. And as far as USA, you just knew if USA, it was a USA original cartoon, with the exception of Wildcats. It was the drizzling shits. It was not good. I remember watching the Mortal Kombat series, and it got a whole 13 episodes. But
they had Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. They had Street Fighter, which was a terrible one because it was focused only on Guile, and I'm like, he's not even the main character in any aspect of this.
No.
And then they also had Savage Dragon.
Savage Dragon, actually, I'll pull back. Savage Dragon and Wildcats were both pretty good. I enjoyed both of those.
But they had input from the creators into them, whereas those others were like, okay, it's just a big marketing thing.
How can we rape this and pillage all we can get out of it?
Yeah, pretty much. It's the same sort of scenario of what happened with Ninja Turtles, right? And I don't know if you had that on your list, but Ninja Turtles started off very dark. Now, would it have survived on its own just in that format? I don't know. But once they made it a kids' TV series, it could be anything you wanted to at that point because now it was out there.
I toyed with that right there because of the fact that the Eastman and them black and white comic was very violent. It would be very R-rated by any standard. And then but then it's like its first mainstream exposure was very kiddie campy.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I don't want people to think I'm reaching too far. Then I fuck around and put Swamp Thing on here. So
that's the one that when we were talking about this originally, and again, I didn't get the chance to finish putting together a list because I have been on the road pretty much all month. But when we were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, do you include that one or not? Because it's
it is. I mean, honestly, it would have.
It went that way, but it fit. It became more popular and hit the mainstream just because of the cartoon. It's like if that comic had just been by itself as an independent comic back then, would we even and never got the TV series or the toys? Would we even still be talking about it? Because I don't know that it would have survived. It's not like it was Spider-Man and it was going to stick around whether you gave it anything or not, right?
So my next two are kind of bridged together. I'll start with one and then I'll go to the other. So Sir Wes Craven, he makes the list again. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Everybody's favorite children murdering pedophile got a video game. He got toys, and when I say toys, I mean these were actually very kiddie toys, like Talking Freddy, pull string Talking Freddy. You had the Freddy doll that you could change the clothes on or whatever. I mean, a whole slew of shit. A terrible video game, and I mean a terrible video game. There was trading cards, there was comics, there was magazines. I mean, you name it. I remember going to the store and getting those horror cards that had the Freddy stickers in them. You know, and this was geared towards us, and it was pop culture at its best, I guess.
Well, even now they still make those. Like, look at all the Toonie Terror ones they made it where they're cartoon animated looking versions of them. For that, you know that other than an adult collector who just wants to be a completionist, most people aren't buying that. Other than kids who see it like, oh, it's an action figure of Freddy. But I wouldn't have wanted one when I was a kid. I'd be like, oh, that fucking might come alive at night.
Kitty looking like my shirt here. So yeah, I know it was just amazing that when you look at the roots of who this character is, he's a child murderer. When you really peel the onion back a little further, it was always kind of speculated. He was a bit of an old pedo as well. And there is a children's line.
And he's demonic and all now. And you think about, am I going to buy a toy and bring that home? Because I'm thinking like, remember the movie Small Soldiers where they come alive and go to war with each other and you're stuck between the two warring factions? I'm like, fuck no, I ain't taking that home.
So it kind of bridges into my next one, and that's the Friday the 13th, because it's actually a pretty decent game. I will say that is one of the few NES games that I will still occasionally go back to and turn on. I enjoy the opening sequence, and I enjoy getting murdered by Jason. There's nothing better than you seeing that screen, because I never killed this motherfucker but like once. Never beat the game. Yeah, well, when I say kill him, you defeat him enough where he gets the fuck out of the cabin. But when he kills your ass, you and your friends are dead. When that purple Jason shows, your ass is done for. Now, I never really understood the Medusa heads and why the counselors were flinging rocks, but hey, it is what it is. That was a very fun game but it was an odd property to do a children's game in '88.
Yeah, and thinking on it brings to mind another one that again, it may be on your list somewhere, but didn't really become more of a kid-friendly property until probably the 90s or even the 2000s, but the Evil Dead stuff, because that's everywhere now with video games and all too, and
I
action figures,
and because it's became more prevalent in the last 10. I tried to stick to 80s and 90s because these are properties we shouldn't have had. My parents should have loved us better.
I do have one to throw at you that was a PG one, but I'll save it for later just in case you have it. But it was a PG one that should not have been marketed to kids, but got a full-length series cartoon on Fox Kids, and I'm pretty sure there were toys too, but I don't remember having any because I wasn't that into it.
Okay. Moving next, The Terminator.
Yeah, that one was one of the ones I had on my mind originally when we started talking about this.
I mean, there was toys, games, cards. I mean, they actually had pretty cool action figures as well. I mean, those were pretty legit for the time, honestly. Because I remember having the endoskeleton, And when you move the arms, you see the things in the chest moving. I mean, at the time, that was pretty damn revolutionary in the world of toys.
Well, even that, I think some of the earliest toys from that, they weren't necessarily those, but they were like marketed more towards the younger audience, and they had like the pop caps and stuff and the guns and all, and they had it was honestly it was like they took Arnold and designed him from Commando and then just repainted him and put him in a different clothing outfit for a Terminator toy, and it was very 5 points of articulation type thing.
I remember having the Arnold where he like half of him is robot and half where he's got these battle damaged up, and then I actually had the talking Terminator 2 Arnold.
Yeah, I remember that one.
That's one of the pieces I wish I still had today, actually, because that was actually very cool. Both of those were really, but this is like I said. And the next one, Alien.
Yeah, that one came to my mind early on too.
They had a toy line in '79. The Xenomorph was out there as a toy in '79. How mind blowing is that, honestly? Nothing about that movie screams it's marketable towards kids.
No, that's one of those ones where a ton of jump scares and stuff just where they pop out at you. I'm like, really? We're gonna sell this? And I think I don't know if they had a toy line as early on either, but Predator as well. They did the same thing.
Yeah, he was in my honorable mentions because I do remember the toy line. That's the first taste of Alien versus Predator. We initially wound up with I want to say it was around 94, 95. I remember seeing that, and that was actually a very cool. I don't remember who put the toy out. Actually, honestly, it's a 2-pack though. They had the two of them in there. And the Predator actually had the mask that stuck to him. It was a pretty cool look. It was very Predator one-ish.
Yeah, those were. I don't know. I don't see how you. I guess I'm trying to figure out what's the market for that because you don't think the adults. I mean, it's more prevalent now to have an adult collector, especially after COVID. Like these people who have never been into this stuff after COVID, we're all into it because hey, I can buy and get stuff at home because I can't leave home. I get into more stuff. So now it's a even bigger hobby for a lot of people than it was. But, in 2000, whatever year Iron Man came out, started making pop culture, comic culture like that, into pop culture, I should say. And you see it now, but back then you didn't. So I'm like, who was marketing this to? Who are you selling this to?
Yeah, like towards the late 80s, the 90s, you can kind of understand the toys, the video games, the the cards, whatever. But in '79, that to me there was a Xenomorph and the Space Jockey. In '79 is just like baffling because like literally she spends the last 20 minutes of this movie in her bra and panties or t-shirt panties with nips hanging out. Nothing about this says, "Hey kids, come play here."
Well, look at it in modern day too. Go play Fortnite one time. Every single one of these characters we're talking about just about is in Fortnite.
Really?
Yeah.
I was quite surprised when I heard John Wick was there, and I was like, wow.
Oh, dude, you got John Wick, you've got Ripley, you've got Alien Xenomorphs in there, you've got Predators in there. Indiana Jones was just added to it recently. I mean, just about any character you come up with is in that game now as a skin that you can play with.
So to round out my top 10, and I got a handful of honorable mentions. Tales from the Crypt.
I forgot that existed, but I remember the cartoon now. That cartoon is actually on Tubi as well.
And actually, I didn't realize it had as long a run as it did. It initially only had like 39 episodes, but it resurrected it in '99. I didn't realize it came back at some point in '99 and got a handful more episodes there. But you had a lot of stuff out there for Tales of the Crypt, and their HBO series it was not kid friendly, so to speak. But the fact that they turned that into a kiddies cartoon, Tales from the Crypt Keeper, or however I think that's what it was actually.
Yeah, I think that's what it's actually called
on ABC. But it's like, wow, really?
That's surprising that it was on those network ones. I mean, like I can see it being if it was a streaming one and that was all it was, but that didn't exist back then. But seeing it on network television is crazy. But
that's one of those that you feel like it might have slipped on the radar at Fox because they had like Married with Children and some very raunchy things. Not so much in ABC or CBS or NBC. Those three networks typically, they were fairly wholesome as far as their children's programming.
NBC definitely because they're the national broadcasting one, but ABC, and I don't know what year they acquired them or how long, but being owned by Disney too, because they're owned by Disney now, it's kind of
Yeah.
really you put that stuff out. It's
And
a
maybe at
bit
the
of a
time,
shocker.
maybe they were owned by Viacom. Then I'm not sure.
Might have been. I don't know. We'd have to look it up, and I haven't delved into anything like that looks that far back. But interesting thought, though.
So for honorable mentions, I got the Highlander, who squeezed 42 episodes, and a toy
Oh
line.
yeah. I don't remember having any of the toys, but I do remember the show.
I didn't remember having any of the toys. When I went back and looked and doing my research, I was like, "Oh, those are terrible." I mean, it's one of McLeod descendants, but
Yeah.
42 episodes, that's commendable. You con somebody into putting your shit on the air that long, God bless.
Yeah.
Starship Troopers got an animated series.
I remember that one too.
Yeah. And last but not least, everybody's favorite raunchy comedy, other than Porky's, maybe from the 80s, Police Academy. And an animated series.
And toy line, because I had some of the toys.
Yeah.
Those I remember, and those were, yes, they were raunchy comedy. That one doesn't stand out to me as much, maybe just because it was a comedy, but it does. Now that you say that, yeah, thinking back on watching the movies and stuff.
There's some things today. If you were to put those movies out today, they would catch some flack.
Yeah, I can see that. A couple of others I didn't hear you mention though. This is the one I was talking about earlier. That wasn't an R-rated; it was PG, but it did not fit a kid mold to be a cartoon as long as it was, especially and the toy line. But Beetlejuice.
I saw that. That was one that I was like, but I didn't remember it being R-rated. I was like, I want to say it's PG-13, but nothing about that movie.
Yeah, it's PG.
Nothing about that movie screams, "Hey, children!" But hey, Nickelodeon done a great job of making it children based.
Yeah, and then Attack of the Killer Tomatoes as well. You remember? Again, not an R-rated, but at the same time, it does not stand out as a.
That song is brutal, and now for some reason now it's in my head, Monster. So thank you.
I got one though that I'm surprised you missed, and it is a '90s one, but it's still from that time, that same concept, but it's from the '90s. But Spawn.
Ooh, how did I miss that?
Toy line, HBO had the cartoon because it was so violent, but
I guess maybe because it wasn't on HBO, it didn't correlate with me like it was geared towards children. But they were a hard R.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like hearing Keith David go fuck her. I'm just saying, he says it like no other. And it's like, then he's like, holy shit, that's Goliath. Oh man, Goliath's got a potty mouth.
I'll bring up another one too that even though it's not a movie, but it should have. And I see how when it went to a certain aspect, it became kid friendly. But if you go back in time to what it actually was to begin with, or what it led up to this point, it shouldn't have been. But think about Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling. Now, I'm thinking about it because I see your taker back there behind you, but think about having the Sheik on there. If this had not been the WWE Sheik, but the actual Sheik from prior, and the things he said and the stuff he did in the ring, and
Sheik will humble you with his 12-inch dick. He has no problem telling you about that.
Yeah, you think about how that got over as a cartoon, and how the WWE got everybody over as cartoon-like superheroes and stuff. But think back to wrestling before that point. That should have never been.
Well, honestly, okay, that was mid-'80s. We're at the peak of a Cold War still, and they made a Soviet Nikolai Volkov into a lovable dolt on a cartoon. How does this get by our censors? Especially as nigga as we were in a Cold War at the time. It's like, holy shit. But go back and watch it. He's like this lovable doofus. Like you can only like, he just undermines the schemes of things.
So, yeah, I don't know how you get by with all with all that back then. It's a very strange thing to think about. How did they sell this stuff? How did they market this? How did they? And again, I think it had all had to come back to. I know some of it was before, but a lot of it had to come back to the whole He-Man thing of, okay, we're going to take now that He-Man's out here, and it should not have been thought of as a kid's thing. It's a barbarian. There's mystical stuff. It's supposed to be closer to Conan, but we kiddied it up to make it kid friendly. But it only got that way because they said, hey, we're going to take away this. Ronald Reagan said, we're going to take away this regulation. You can now market it or do whatever with it. So everybody's kind of like, oh, let's just piggyback off of that now.
I'll be honest, I think we peaked as a species, pop culture wise, and from about 84 to 94, probably. That decade of, that's probably where we peaked pop culture wise. You'll never see another time like that again, ever.
No, I don't even see a lot of stuff now when it comes out. It's so flash in the pan and quick that most of it doesn't create pop culture references that last forever.
No, we're very TikTok attention based now. TikTok has ruined even us as adults. I find myself where I have a hard time really getting to the bottom of a video versus watching 30, 40 seconds and scrolling on.
We'll go back. We use this in some training we do, but go back and watch anything from the 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s. Watch how long a camera angle stays on something when they're doing a TV show or a movie. Camera angle stays that way for several minutes, and you talk, and everything's just seen from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Watch one now. The average camera time on any actual scene now from one angle is 3 seconds or less, because that's about the amount of time the human attention span is right now. So most things after 3 to 7 seconds, I think is the average. It's somewhere in there. But after 3 to 7 seconds, they flip to a different camera. If you see something stay on a camera angle longer than that, it's like, wow, you just actually pay attention and watch one of your shows when you watch it.
Now that you say that, it does kind of, and I think that's probably why when HD TVs first kind of become prevalent, that might be why it looks so weird, because they were doing that and that was new to us, as well as the HD. It's like, because you remember when those first HD TVs come out, it's like, I can't watch this shit, it don't look right. It's like everything was like moving weird.
Yeah, it's moving too much. It gives you like motion sickness.
Yeah. And now that you say that, that's probably because they were changing the way they filmed things as well at the time, not just in HD, but in, practices, so to speak.
We'll go back and watch the Daredevil Netflix show, and they make such a big deal, and for two reasons. The choreography on this hallway fight scene he had was amazing, but watch that. They talk all the time about how that fight scene was shot in one take and from one camera angle for the entire 2 minute or whatever it was fight. It's like, why is that such a big deal? Now I'm like, oh, now I get that, because they usually swap around to different cameras, but they shot from one camera, one angle, the entire thing. That's completely different than what we're used to. So I see how it stands out now.
So that's my R-rated properties. We pretty well close them down.
Yeah, I think you hit most of the ones I would have had anyway if I'd had a chance to actually put my list together. It's been so busy I haven't had time. But with that, we finished up the focus topic. Let's go straight to Nerd Out, because I know you had some questions prepared this week, or at least one, and I popped one in here very quickly right before we started, so I've at least got something to start with. So for anybody who hasn't been here before, this is part of the show. We ask random questions that center around topics of the day. We try to respond with no prep time. We don't share our questions beforehand, but we'd love to hear your response on it too. So please feel free to expand upon our answers or give your response in the comments below. But with that, Hassel, you've been leading most of the show, so I'll let you keep going, and I'll let you throw your question out there first, sir.
So would you say that these properties like this being geared towards children in the beginning of the 80s led to the fundamentals of the anti-hero becoming popularized as they did in the mid 90s?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think it had a part in it. I don't think it plays all the part, because if you look back at like even as we said, even though comics were still starting to be more towards adults in the way they were writing, especially like Marvel and stuff. But think back to the characters they introduced, and even with DC when they did Watchmen in the late 80s. Watchmen, the Punisher, Wolverine, that stuff started, I think, leading you in that direction, and that's probably the kickoff of it more so than the shows. But bringing those shows and movies into that realm just kind of, I think, furthered it. I don't think you can negate their their addition to it, and I think it. I will say I think probably led more to the desensitizing of some of the stuff. Like you watch somebody's heart get ripped out in Mortal Kombat, and you just stand there holding it while it's beating. Did that desensitize some of the rest of us later on? Probably so.
It possibly so. Possibly so. That's a very good point. I do feel like, Punisher, Wolverine, because at the time they were not as mainstream as they are, where they're in every damn issue or something as they are today. In the 80s, they were building that fan base or whatnot. So they were the building blocks and the foundation, so to speak. I just kind of feel like maybe us getting things like, as children lines that we shouldn't have got led to the, what, this guy, even though he's morally great, he's a badass. We like him. And it led to, the kickoff of everything just wanting to be very anti-establishment, anti-boss, anti-leadership, so to speak.
That's probably really fair to say. I mean, I don't know. I think you had this, like I said, we both said, you had the stuff that was starting to lean that way, but the mainstream is what was really going to push it even further. For me, I had a very simple question, so I'm just curious to see what you would like to do. But taking it from the other direction, what's one of the things that we have that's more of a kid property that you would like to see made more of an adult version of? To take it from PG to R-rated, maybe.
Probably the one that would have the most legs to me, and that's something you and I have discussed several times, will be the Power Rangers. I would really like to see and it doesn't have to be full-blown rated R, but I would like to see a hard-ass PG-13 or a soft R. I mean, with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like I said, you don't have to have tremendous amounts of blood, guts, cussing, or nudity. Although, I mean, we'd have liked some nudity of Kimberly in the back of the day, but it is what it is.
I'm not even going to go there.
We were young then. Today it'd be a little creepy. But, I would like to see something like that. Maybe geared towards not so much teens with attitudes as it is early 20 users. They're 21. They're old enough to get a beer at least.
That would be interesting, and that's kind of one of the ones I had. I had two that I picked out. Said, hey, maybe one of these two, Power Rangers being one of them. But I do look back at the bootleg, for lack of a better term, because I'm not sure what to call it. But that Power Rangers one that the one guy did that was very dark and R-rated. It was a YouTube type thing, and they got kind of fans for showing it. Yeah.
Actually, there was a couple of fairly decently well-known stars. I'll put it that way. Not mega stars, but well-known stars in that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen something in that aspect of it. And also, I think you get more away from some of the camp and get more into like if you would go back and watch Once and Always, it starts to lean more towards that PG, almost PG-13, soft PG-13, because they're like, they got killed. It was not we destroyed somebody. They got killed or whatever it is. So, stuff like that popping out. Speaking of that, before I go into my other one, have you seen so Netflix today released the release date for the next show of Power Rangers, because it's going strictly Netflix now, and it's September 28th. But in the credits, because they showed the opening credit video, they have David Jost back in the credits. He's going to be Billy.
They released a picture today. He's standing there with the new team. And he's not in uniform now, mind you, but so I'm assuming he's in the
They showed one in uniform of him too, in the Mighty Morphin Blue Ranger uniform. So I don't know how long he's on the show, how much he's doing, but he is in it. So I was like, really?
He doesn't even have to morph to me. He could just be a mentor to him.
Oh yeah,
that in itself will be great. I mean, if he does occasionally morph, like if they really have a tough villain, I would be cool with that.
Well, Lord Zed is the villain in it. Because there's pictures. It's the one. It's the updated suit that they brought back, which I don't like as much, but still, it does
seem a little bulky.
So they've got Billy and Zed, and I'm wondering. I'm just like, does this feed off of the Once and Always special, or does it still treat that as completely separate? Or I want to know where that fits into it, but only time will tell, and that's coming pretty soon because that's next month. So
I will say, as a secondary backup to my Power Rangers, Transformers would make a really, really good R-rated animated movie.
Yeah.
If you were to do like your Cybertronian war type deal, like starting out with Megatron in the war pits, build or the Coliseum, building himself up to and getting the Decepticons off the ground, Orion turning into Prime. You could have some really cool stuff there with a lot of violence. That would be pretty cool.
So since you brought that up, before I do get to my other one, now I got to share this too. Did you see the news today where Hasbro sold? It's been a couple weeks ago. Hasbro sold that E1 Entertainment they had bought that was going to do all their movies and stuff in their movie universe. But after they sold it, they kept some of the executives on and made Hasbro Entertainment as part of their another division under the Hasbro group. So now they're working with E1 and Lionsgate about all the movies they're going to make, but then they're still sticking to some of the stuff. But they said they have 30 projects on the docket right now to try and work on. I noticed though when I read the list of 30, and they didn't show all 30 projects. They named several of them. Like they want to do another Dungeons and Dragons movie. They want to do that Transformers Earth One or whatever, Year One or whatever, where they're showing them. And then, Chris Hemsworth is supposed to be Optimus, and Scarlett Johansson's in it. But it's Before the War shows Prime and Megatron as an animated series. But looking through everything, I didn't see anything for Power Rangers listed in it. So I'm like, are you gonna taking a break for a year from the toys? Or are you taking a break from everything?
That's a little interesting, honestly, because that's a cash cow and always has been for any company that owns it. So the fact that you would take a break toy wise for a year is kind of baffling. Because if I own this property, I wouldn't want to take a break from it at all as long as it's profitable.
Yeah,
and you're going to take a break media wise as well. That's kind of I don't know. Maybe they're taking it away. You can't miss it if it doesn't go away. One of those deals, as Bruce Prichard says.
So it's I'm looking at it now just because I wanted to pull up, but it's so E1 is now part of Lionsgate, but they have a $2 billion annual retail sale between Hasbro and E1 that they've set up for 30 different projects. But man, where were they at? I was trying to find some of the projects listed. So there's something with they're gonna do something with Magic the Gathering for entertainment, which makes sense. It's popular, so make a movie or something. Dungeons and Dragons. They said several Hasbro gaming properties. I don't know what all those are, but are you going to do a Monopoly or so?
Actually, I have seen something where they were bullshitting around about a Monopoly movie. I don't.
Yeah.
I see that being turned out very much the way that this Barbie movie just turned out. I don't see any way around that unless you go some bullshit Jumanji type movie in the Monopoly world.
But I got to admit, I do still want to see Barbie. The kid got to go see it with his mom, but I haven't seen it yet. But I want to watch it at home just because I've heard that it's actually got some funny parts, but then there's also some parts that I'll be like cringe at. But I do want to see it just to see it. But they also listed on here Nerf, Transformers, Play-Doh, Peppa Pig, and several other premier brands, but they don't have Power Rangers listed, which is really weird because the entire time that toy line's been around, it's had a show.
How does Nerf? Well, where do we go with Nerf? I'll be honest. Nerf or nothing, but what the world?
Yeah,
how does this become I'm a bit of a loss there, I'll be honest.
Yeah, well, I'm not even going to remark on that one because I have no idea where that would go. But I will say my other property that I would have said that would be really interesting to see as an R-rated is a Hasbro property. I do G.I. Joe.
Oh, that's a no-brainer.
Because G.I. Joe, then you can actually kill some of the characters versus everybody got shot with a laser, but nobody crashed and died.
Yeah, just don't give me The Rock and don't give me Bruce Willis. Don't throw Channing Tatum up my ass. Give me a real G.I. Joe. If the team that just done this last Transformer movie does the next Joe, I'll be happy, I think.
I didn't mind any of those actors that you named being characters in there. It's just the movie was not well written for either one of those. So it's like no matter what they did, it wasn't going to come off good.
Okay, The Rock would make a great Roadblock. But Roadblock is not the fucking star of the movie.
No.
Channing Tatum was a poorly written Duke, so you know what? Maybe I cannot bust his balls too bad. I'm okay with fucking Bruce Willis and acting. But I don't know, just the way they were all positioned was just terrible. Dr. Mindbender was awful in it.
Put together.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis as General Joseph Colton had no problem with that. However,
No,
he's not gonna make any more movies anymore anyway, so you don't have to worry
no,
about
his
that
mind's
one.
mush. So yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say that.
he did at least sign over his AI likeness to another actor. So hey,
And you know what? I actually didn't have a problem with Dennis Quaid as General Hawk.
no, I
Uh,
like Quaid. I love
Channing,
Randy a little better, but I like Dennis too.
I've watched Channing Tatum in some other movies too, where he's got some action movies and stuff. I mean, they're mostly action comedies, but he could pull off Duke. I don't have a problem with that.
I will say he is actually not a bad actor. Whatever the movie is he done with a dog, I wouldn't have thought would have been.
Oh, dude, that one was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you actually see he can actually act in that. It wasn't just a comedy or bullshit. I mean, it's more emotional support animal. And it actually gets fairly emotional at times. I'll actually tip my hat to him on that.
Yeah, I didn't mind the girl who played Lady J because she's been in a lot of stuff. She was in Agents of Shield. She's fine. Scarlet, I didn't one way or the other. I don't think they've had a good one of her yet. Ray Park is great as Snake Eyes. Now I will say that the guy that played Flint, no, that was
Ooh,
not Flint's character. He could have
no,
been any other character and pulled it off, but as Flint, no, Flint is a serious guy. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He doesn't take things lightly, and this dude was all flipping about everything. I'm like, man, this is not Flint's character.
no, not at all.
Could he have been Shipwreck? Absolutely. Was he Flint? Not in the least.
I do want to see old scurvy Shipwreck in a movie. Give us this Hasbro. Him and Polly both.
Well, I want to see him cross over to Transformers. That's what they're building up to. So maybe we will see in the future. But with that, I think that covers us for today. So it's about time for us to get out of here. But before we leave, let's make sure we tell everybody where they can find us at.
Man, you can find us on all the social medias. We are on Twitter at Nerdy MR Show. You can find us at Instagram at the Nerdy Manroom Show and on Facebook at Hassel Hutchison via the Nerdy Manroom Show. We are on Spotlight Media, Roku TV, Fire TV, and most importantly, find us on the YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, share the fudge out of us.
And while you're doing that, don't forget to check out our extended Nerdy Manroom family member, Big Rob. You can find him on his channel, Big Rob's House of Entertainment and No Chinese Food.
No Chinese food!
And go check out our sponsors who we want to give a big thank you to for sponsoring the show, These Own Collectibles. You can find them on the internet at theseowncollectibles@gmail.com and on Facebook at These Own Collectibles or in their store at 305 Main Street, Tifton, Georgia. Visit them for all your nerdy needs from comics to Legos, trading cards, toys, games, violent R-rated movies, probably somewhere in there, and more. Help them support the local artist community by supporting their cause of bringing unity through community. Fandoms unite. And make sure you stick around through the credits and check out some shout outs to some of our friends whose details you can find at the very end. But before we get there, before we actually close out today, we do want to tell everybody, keep coming back. We've got some really big announcements coming in the near future. Some things we're working on behind the scenes to enhance the fan experience here at the Nerdy Manroom. We're not quite able to share them just yet, but they should be coming pretty soon. And when they are, we will.
People, this is like legit.
We will make sure everybody knows as soon as we do. As soon as we have all the details ironed out. Let me put it that way, because we know what it is, but we don't have all the details ironed out. Let me rephrase
I'm
that.
pretty excited, guys. I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty excited.
And come back next time. Join us here. We have a special guest interview. Until then, live nerdy and check the rating before you watch.